Hello there, it's Peter Ryan here from Fluent Leadership, and I'm joined today by Kari Sutton. Now, Kari is a children's resiliency expert and just about to release a book on 20th of November, actually. So by the time you're viewing this, it might already be out, which you can get on karisutton.com. The book's called Raising a Mentally Fit Generation. So good morning, Kari, and thank you for joining me.
Good morning, Pete. How are you?
I am very well. I'm very well. And look, thanks for joining me and talking about such an important topic. I know it's something that you've been working on and working in the field of children's education for many, many years. Can you start with maybe talking to me about what prompted you to be researching in this area and what was the need that you were sort of fulfilling by releasing this book?
Yes, as you can see by the grey hair, been in education for a while. What I really noticed over the past 15 to 20 years is that we actually have, it's almost like a tidal wave. It became, there was little movements of the sea at the beginning, and you started to notice things weren't sitting right with our kids, but it's then gathered momentum. And what's concerning me now is that it's a tidal wave that's swamping this generation. There is a new morbidity.
Yes.
Mental health disorders, anxiety, depression, self-harm and suicide are robbing our children of their futures. And each of those children are not just numbers. They're faces, they've got families, and they've got futures. And what I really wanted to tackle was, what is the root cause? How can we lay the foundations of positive mental health so that these things don't have to happen, so that we don't have to be ambulances at the bottom of cliffs anymore?
Yes.
We want to put strong protective fences at the top.
Well, it's a leading indicator in my mind, for who enters our workforce. And I've been in HR, human resources, for over 20 years now. And I've seen a real shift. So a lot of work is being done in creating, availability of employee assistance programs, mental health first aid, well-being, resilience programs, psychological safety. It is the absolute focus. As corporations turn their corporate social responsibility slightly inwards to look after their people, and it's a trend. It's like you say, it's a wave. Coming through.
It's not just a trend because, and I'm not sure when your listeners will be listening to this, but what's just happened yesterday, which was the 16th of November, the Productivity Commission report into mental health and the cost of mental ill health to the Australian economy was released by the government. $220 billion a year.
Wow.
Mental ill health costs the Australian economy.
Yeah.
We have to, when you were talking about all of the things, but mental health, suicide prevention training, all of those things, the employee assistance programs, those are really important parts of making a well, healthy organization, because to have a healthy and well organization, you actually need to have healthy, well team members.
Yeah, absolutely. And people that can recognize the signs and support each other, I think is one of those key things. And I suppose that folds back nicely to educators and parents and people who are in contact with young people, recognizing the signs. I think one of the examples you gave is if you have a classroom of 28 kids, one of them has already been diagnosed with depression. Two of them at some point statistically have self-harmed, and 7 of them have some sort of ongoing mental health condition. I mean, that's alarming. isn't it?
It is alarming, but that's what the Australian Bureau of Statistics is saying. This is not data that we're pulling out of thin air. So if you think of your children's classrooms, that you have 25 to 30 little people in those classrooms, and you look through that classroom window, what parents need to realize is that there are the undercurrents of mental ill health starting from a very young age.
Yeah.
And we often don't recognize it. And what my study has shown, so in 2003 and 2004, I was blessed to work with and study with Martin Seligman and look at positive psychology. So
Yes.
positive psychology talks about the outliers, looks at people who are thriving and says, what are they doing that's different? How can we have more of that in the general population so we can help the general population thrive?
Yes.
And it's not just happyology. It's actually looking at the research-backed intentional activities, mindsets, attitudes that build in mental health and well-being into our daily lives.
And I like how Seligman talks about thriving, as opposed to, I suppose, what most of us do with our childhood is we kind of survive it, only to have to then deal with sort of the issues and, you know, the beliefs that we may have in our own mind about ourselves and about the world later on in adult life. So it's kind of doom and gloom, I suppose. But I suppose the other thing is this book is about the tactics and the techniques and what people can do to actually raise a mentally fit generation. So
it's like, but if you look at in the 1970s in Australia anyway, well, actually around the world in the 1970s, before that time, people weren't talking about physical fitness or the importance of physical fitness, to be really honest. In the 1970s, for those people who still did grow up, it was the get fit, life be in it.
Right.
So they talked about that. It was a jingle, a whole television commercial, and it talked about physical fitness and the importance of physical fitness for longevity, for our well-being. What I firmly believe is happening now is that just like we can improve our physical fitness, we can improve our mental fitness. Yeah. And what mental fitness is the ability to actually use the resources we have to understand life. And it's not saying that we're never going to face problems, because people who have good, positive mental health and well-being know that crap is going to happen sometimes. They don't think that it's going to come up all roses. But what they do have are the tools, strategies, and attitudes that help them navigate that bumpy road, that help them realize, you know, if I've gotten into a hole, this is how I can get out of it.
Yes, yes. And
unfortunately, what's going on with our children at the moment, there's been so much, almost to a certain degree, and I'm not blaming parents, but rescuing of our children. And I'm sure you might have seen it, Pete. How many times did you go to a sports carnival and everybody got a ribbon?
Yeah, yeah.
Is that what life or business is really like?
Well, this is the thing. I've done it myself as a father. I've gone in and rescued instead of sort of letting them figure out how to swim. I've absolutely done that too often, because I think inherently parents want their children not to have as rough a time. They want to provide this idealized sort of experience for their children, but
and those little people, so those young people are pieces of our hearts walking around outside our bodies.
Yeah.
So, and if you think about it neurologically, we actually have something in our prefrontal cortex that are called mirror neurons. And so when you see somebody, that's where empathy comes from. A lot of, we're looking at our mirror neurons. If you see somebody eating a banana, your actually mouth might start watering, or you might feel like a banana, because what it's doing is mirroring what's happening for that other person. So when our children are in pain, whether it be physical pain or emotional pain, that tugs on our heartstrings.
Yes.
And often what we do is go in and scoop them up and not want them to be in pain. But what that's doing is stunting their resilience. Instead, we need to sit with them and cradle them. And I'm not saying pick them up and take them out of the situation, but we sit with them and hold them while they're experiencing those difficult, big emotions. Because when we do that, we actually show them, you know what, you can get through this disappointment. You can feel it, and it is not going to kill you. It is not, it hurts like hell, but you will get through it.
And I think right now is a very, very sort of telling time as well. I mean, looking at the younger generation now having to deal with the whole notion of terrorist attacks that just don't make sense. The bushfires that we've just been through, just relatively recently anyway, and now COVID. And the types of the numbers and the statistics of people dying, and the change to lifestyle, and it can be exceptionally unsettling to rip routine from children. And so what tips do you have for parents and carers and grandparents and educators to talk to kids during these times?
The first one is exactly what you said, Pete. Talk.
Yeah.
Talk to them. Spend that time, because as one of the psychologists I work with has said to me time and time again, Kari, the way kids spell love is Time. And often what happens is these things, our devices, get in the way.
Yeah.
So put the device down. And again, I've done it as well. I've been busy when I'm helping Mitchell and doing different things, but who's my nephew that I've helped raise. I was busy at different times, but there were also times where I knew, you know what, I need to spend quality time with him right now. He needs me. Everything else aside, your time, buddy.
Yeah.
And so it's making that specific time where they can connect with you, looking eye to eye, knowing that you're there with them. And even if they've got tweens or teens, sometimes looking eye to eye isn't fashionable. And I know Mitchell didn't want to do that as he was growing up. What we sometimes did was sit back to back and have a hot chocolate, or sit back to back and talk, or go for a drive. That's a really good one. But be there. Absolutely. Because if we can be there when they're dealing with things that we may think are inconsequential, to them, those inconsequential things are actually huge things in their life.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure we make that time to talk. The next one would be, when you are talking, talk about our emotions in a developmentally appropriate way. Yep. So don't lay heavy stuff on your 5-year-old, but in a developmentally appropriate way, talk to them and say, you know, sometimes I get upset. Like sometimes daddy gets upset or mummy gets upset because these things happen. I went for a job and I didn't get it. I was really disappointed too. So you talk to your kids and help them label it, because in Western society particularly, we don't have a really good emotional literacy.
Yes.
Did you ever see the movie Inside Out?
Yeah, I did actually.
Yeah. So you'll remember there were 5 emotions, but they're the 5 emotions we normally talk about. What about content? What about grateful? These are all emotions as well, but we generally go to joy or happiness, sadness, fear, rage, and disgust or disappointment. And so there's ones that we play out on a daily basis, but we don't talk about or help our children understand the rest, and that there's nuances. Yes. You've got to name it to tame it. So if children can talk about an emotion and get it outside themselves, they have a much better chance of regulating themselves. Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm a big proponent of talking to my boys, and maybe it's a boy thing as well, of sitting in the car with them as the passenger, driving along and talking, because we're not making eye contact. No, that's right. It's a great opportunity, and you've got them captured. They can't really get out unless generally they can't get out. But it's looking at that and those opportunities, Pete, because one of the things, as I said just a minute ago, you've got to name it to tame it. If kids don't talk about their emotions, research from the United States that came out of Harvard and Yale 2 years ago, they were talking to freshmen. So university students who just come to campus, and they wanted to figure out what did they wish their parents had given them before they came. So it was 6 months in, they'd been there for 6 months. And what they said was, you know, we're very fortunate. Our parents gave us the money we needed. They got us here. They've given us this Ivy League education. The thing we really wished they'd done for us was help us deal with difficult emotions like loneliness, disappointment, and being just and dealing with almost depression-like symptoms because we're away from home and we didn't know what to do.
Yes, yes.
They're
Think
outside that influence.
I see that playing out inside businesses as well, where people really struggle dealing with ambiguity. Change is so prevalent now. It's not a thing. It's business as usual, and we've seen a heck of a lot of it recently in the way in which we engage in the workplace, or don't engage in the workplace as people get made redundant as well. So dealing with that uncertainty and ambiguity, not being able to name the emotion or deal with those difficult emotions, I see really being played out.
And the interesting point that you said just there is that people don't know how to deal with those difficult emotions. When that happens and there's a vacuum, it will frequently be replaced by or filled by anger.
Yeah.
Anger masks fear.
Yes, absolutely.
So when there's fear and ambiguity, anger is a much more socially acceptable thing to have than being afraid as adults. We don't want to tell people, we don't want to be vulnerable, we don't want to be afraid. So what we'll mask it with is anger. And when that anger happens and people can't regulate themselves, that's when you get office rage, that's when you get broken team relationships, bullying. It's just a really toxic environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen it play out in those quite demonstrable ways. I've also seen it play out in more subtle, sort of passive-aggressive ways too, where people will white ant individuals and even organisations because of that anger. And it's funny, we're seeing that play out in the political spheres too. Not that we want to go down that path, but we see it absolutely with adults. As you're speaking, I was reminded of the 7-Up and the 14-Up and 21-Up, the whole series, which looked at children from the age of 7, looked at them from a psychological perspective, socioeconomic perspective, and just really just traced their lives. And it was just fascinating to me seeing the predictability with the benefit of hindsight and retrospect, looking back at where those adults ended up and their worldview and their ability to deal with the world and succeed in the world based on where they'd come from. How much do you think that plays into the mental fitness of people, sort of their family situation, socioeconomic, social standing? How does that play into it?
A huge amount, Pete, because again, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if children don't, and as you were talking about the 7-Up experiment, or it was a 7-Up experiment, and you give a person, a child, for the first 7 or 8 years of their life, which is early childhood, and you will be able to tell what the person, unless they've had significant therapy on significant trauma for the next many years of their lives, you will generally be able to tell what the adult is going to look like. Early childhood lays the foundation for our psychological well-being, our emotional well-being, what's going to happen, our academic and those sorts of things. So it's really interesting. People often say, and I know we've got NAPLAN in Australia and standardized testing, and people so want to get better at that. What they don't understand is actually children who have the social and emotional capabilities are much likely to perform way better on these standardized tests than children who have just been, who aren't as good socially and emotionally. It's been done in 3, so kindergarten teachers look at the social and emotional development of children, and then they look at them in their mid-teens, they look at them in their late teens. Again, life is a team sport, and we need to have those social and emotional skills. What happens with 7-Up, it really was. The fact is, as we were saying with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, of course, if you are concerned or worried about where your next meal is going to come from, whether dad's going to backhand you, all of those things build themselves into your psyche, build themselves into what's going on in your world. Are you going to be hypervigilant and always thinking that somebody's out to hurt you? These are the things, they're ingrained as habitual patterns of thought in the brain. And that's what happens in early childhood, is that it's like if you, for example, if you and I were walking down a road that had been paved, that was great. But when that road wasn't there, we might have had to fight our way through, maybe with a machete, of getting and clearing grass. That's what these patterns start out as when they're little. So they have to form the patterns in their brain, and whether it be, oh, you're no good at that, you suck, which is sometimes what I've heard parents say to children. Well, once that might not go in, but if it's said over and over and over again, that becomes a neural superhighway.
It does, doesn't it? It becomes hardwired. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then it informs this itty bitty shitty committee, or the itty bitty crappy committee that sits on our shoulder. And anytime as an adult we go and we want to try for a new job, or we're asked to do something else, you might hear, hey, yep, that's a great opportunity. Or you might think, and then it goes, yeah, remember, you're never good at this, you suck, you're not going to amount to much in life.
Yeah.
And often what that voice is replaying is parents, teachers, or other significant adults in early childhood, because in early childhood we're sponges. We do not filter anything. So we actually accept whatever is fed to us about ourselves as truth.
Yes. You're a C student.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what you do.
Yep. Or you're no good at maths, but you'll be great at English.
You'll never make a living being an artist.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think we've all had that at, to some degree through our childhood from influential people. And like you say, in those young formative years, pretty much everybody's influential in your world. So we spoke about opening a dialogue and giving attention, and actually speaking to discomfort and naming emotions. What other sort of practical tips do you have in the book that you think?
Well, I guess one of the really interesting ones is looking and saying, how can we help children be more grateful? Because you would have heard about the reticular activating system. So what you and people say, oh, what? And if anybody doesn't know about the reticular activating system, it's actually saying things like, oh, don't think of a yellow car, or you're not going to see. Then you'll only find yellow cars. Like if you wanted to buy a yellow Mercedes, you'd then be seeing yellow Mercedes everywhere. That's what our brain does. So one of the things.
Also, what Google Analytics does with popping up advertisements on your latest search. Yeah.
Yes, on the sort of things you search. This is what you liked before. This is what you like now. Those are the sorts of things, and I particularly talk about gratitude because what gratitude does is actually help us focus and help our children focus on the things that are going right in their lives. Now, I'm not saying be a Pollyanna-ish about gratitude and saying that everything's wonderful, because in COVID times, particularly in Melbourne and different places around the world when there's lockdown, it's actually been pretty crap and it's been difficult and tough. But the people that have actually come out of it with their psychological health intact found things to be grateful for. Whether it was looking out the neighbour's window and seeing a rainbow that a child had drawn, whether it was being grateful for the way the sun dappled the light in the backyard, or that you got to go out into your backyard, whether it was just actually knowing that you could pick up a phone and call somebody. When we develop gratitude in children, it really helps them understand that they're very blessed. They're very fortunate that they've got lots of things going right for them in their lives.
Yes.
And what that does is orientate the brain to the positive. What we want children to experience, when you look at, so Barbara Fredrickson's work talks about the ratio between positive and negative emotions.
Yep.
And we would much prefer, and this is, of course, we're going to experience negative emotions, and all emotions are valid. It's data. Emotions are simply data. They're telling us about what we're experiencing. It's not good or bad. There's positive emotions or negative emotions, but it's not about judging them. It's just saying these are the things that give us data about what we're experiencing in the world. The more positive emotions we build or we experience, the more psychological capital we build. And this is particularly true at work as well. So if you wanted to look in a workplace situation, it's actually looking and saying, how can we build more positive emotions and relationships within our teams?
Yes.
What does that look like? And it may be looking like taking a post-it note and saying, you know what, even just leaving a post-it note, hey, thank you so much for doing that, and putting that on their desk. Or I'm really grateful that you're my teammate for these reasons, and be specific about it.
Yeah.
Exactly what we do with children. We talk to them about that, because what that does is give them a boost of positivity. So dopamine kicks in and serotonin kicks in, and they feel good. And when they feel good, they actually, as I said before, they broaden their psychological capital. So research in the positive psychology research around this was, when people experience positive emotions, they're able to better think outside the box. The way they did this, one of the researchers, it was in a hospital. They were trainee doctors, and they were two groups, separated into two groups doing rounds. Both groups were given lollipops each. They weren't allowed to suck on them, because that would have changed their chemistry, body chemistry. So they took their body chemistry before, they gave them lollipops, they put them in there. So one group got the lollipops, one group didn't. The group with the lollipops, hit of positive emotion, were actually able to do their rounds. Now, these were pretend patients, so please don't think it was anything but they did their rounds. They identified the problem more quickly and more correctly than the people who did not receive the lollipops. And this is a peer-reviewed study, so it's not, again, it's in medical psychological journals. The fact is, when you go and have the positive emotion, or when you experience positive emotions, you think better. Some of the schools I work with actually got me to come in before NAPLAN, because I'm not sure if your kids experience this, but children going into NAPLAN can have a lot of anxiety, worry, tension, and they have psychosomatic symptoms. So schools actually brought me in to say, what do we do? And I said, absolutely make sure they're prepared and things like that. But at the beginning of the day, tell jokes. Get them laughing about something, because a happy brain that's experiencing positive emotions, much more creative, much more able to think of better solutions and be focused than a negative brain. Because if you think exactly like I do, if I lose my keys sometimes and I'm in a hurry, I'll go over the same place over and over again, looking in exactly the same spot. My brain isn't actually able to think of, where did I put it last? Because it's in a panicked mode.
Yeah, absolutely. The fight or flight. I think it resonates with me, because I see that in the workplace. I see, workplaces that operate with sort of fear, and they are not the ones that are actually very innovative. And the late great,
I was going to ask you, when they operate from fear, are they actually a productive? Is that a productive workplace?
Absolutely not. So they're doing it just to do enough so that they don't attract attention. It's more compliance, and sticking your head up could result in a punitive action of some description, or get the eye of Sauron focused on them.
Wow.
And I was going to say, the late great Sir Ken Robinson,
loved him,
would often say, and love him, that you cannot come up with a creative idea if you're in an environment that stigmatizes mistakes. And yet that is what we do in workplaces, where mistakes are seen as bad or wrong. But if you're not prepared to make a mistake, then nothing creative is going to come from that thought process. And that, unfortunately, is the conflicting dichotomy in workplaces. And so people keep their head down, they don't engage fully, they don't think fully. Mistakes get made, inefficiencies are created. That's the way we've always done it. Why change anything? And suddenly it's a really horrible place to be.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because you were asking for tips and strategies and ideas. I talked about gratitude. The next one I was going to talk about was allowing kids to fail.
Yes.
Allow them to fail and allow them to make mistakes, because that's how they learn. Again, I'm sure you would have heard of Carol Dweck's the growth mindset or the fixed mindset. And we can all grow our mind. We can all change our brains. It is possible with work, with study, with practice and effort. We can do things. We can learn new skills. But to get that skill level, you actually have to make mistakes to get there in the first place. And so many of our children, and what I'm seeing is as young adults as well, they're afraid of making mistakes. And that's where the anxiety comes from. Because if they're afraid of making mistakes, we all make mistakes. We're human.
Yes.
It is a part of the human condition. And the quicker we can get them used to making mistakes and going, you know what? Fail doesn't mean a bad thing. It's just your first attempt in learning.
Correct.
That's it. That's your first attempt. There's many more, and it's okay to make many more. And I think you asked at the beginning of the session, why now? I've worked in the education department and the education system for a long time, and I'm sick of a system that actually makes kids, one, compete against each other, which is still happening because life is a team sport. We need to collaborate, to share, to come together, not compete. And you don't talk about Fight Club.
Yeah.
But the next one is that treats failure as such almost a deadly sin. Like you would, if you fail or you got an F on your paper, that's the worst thing in the world. No.
Yeah.
One,
Yep.
it shows that may not be where your strength lies, but two, hey, maybe that, as Michael J. Fox has said at different occasions, you know what? If the child can't learn the way you're teaching, teach the way the child needs to learn.
Absolutely. Very, very much a Montessori approach in that way. Absolutely. I can't agree more. And I mean, Ken Robinson again would talk about how we have a hierarchy of subjects that comes from an industrial age. Why isn't dance and art one of the core subjects that contribute to tertiary
and philosophy and critical thinking and
Absolutely.
Understanding. And as we were talking about before we started, it was kids need to understand how to critically appraise the information in front of them. We are all living online now, and we've all seen that can be influenced. Our feeds can be influenced by different things that we don't even understand that are there.
Yes.
Our children need to have the ability to critically analyze and critically look and go, and to be able to question and to have the right to question an adult.
Yes. And I and folding back then to the positivity, a lot of what we see online and in the media, because terrible stories and disaster and controversy sells papers and gets clicks. That is what's drowning people's feeds, is that negativity and the conflict and fighting and infighting.
I find that fascinating. So I'm on LinkedIn, and I put every Tuesday and Thursday I put articles up on LinkedIn, and one of mine became a unicorn. So it's been viewed 153,000 times in LinkedIn. So it's been commented on and different things.
Why was that?
Which is, it was about bullying. And the two visuals that went with it. So I've had other positive news stories about positive mental health, about different things. But those two particular stories were both, one was about bullying and one was about suicide. And they had fairly graphic pictures. And it fascinates me to see what gets picked up in the algorithm. What do people look for? What are they willing to engage with? And this comes back again, circling back around, and you were asking for tips. One of the major tips as well is watch your children's media diet.
Yes.
These are the sorts of things on their phone, even for tweens and teens. Would have to be one of the most disruptive things to their sleep. Interestingly, and I don't know if you know Michael Carr-Gregg, but Dr. Michael Carr-Gregg, the child and adolescent psychologist, said when his boys were growing up, they're in their 20s now, when his boys were growing up, he actually said, you know what? We are putting all our digital devices on a table, one at dinner time, but two at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, everybody's phone goes on that table. And what he actually did was give his boys an out. He provided an excuse for his children, because that way they wouldn't get woken up in the middle of the night, but they didn't have to respond to those things. And they could say, oh yeah, Dad's a real bastard. He makes us put our phone there, when really it was actually a whole lot better for their psychological well-being and their physical well-being to not have disrupted sleep.
Yeah.
But you
Yeah.
are absolutely correct about their feed. And this is what I've been saying throughout COVID, as well as the bushfires and different things for our children this year. Watch what they're on. Watch the amount of time they're on these devices, because it is predicated on negative news. And
Yeah.
if they go down that negative spiral, it's really hard to then pull themselves back up again, because there's not a lot of positivity coming out.
No, no. And that's on us, you know,
Mm.
how we interact with children, and what we discuss and what we talk about. So the book is, as we speak, is just about to be launched, about the same time that that elections get certified in some country on the other side of the world. So people can go to
People go to
karisutton.com.
karisutton.com,
Yep.
or you can, on karisutton.com, you can see about the book. If you want to try it before you buy, there's a place where you can download the first third. So it's been broken into parts.
Okay.
The book's broken into parts, but yes, you can download it from there. You can and take a look to see if you like it. Then if you would like to buy it, please, Amazon or Booktopia, wherever's cheapest for you, to go and purchase it through there. Because honestly, it really is just talking about, it's practical things. I'm not absolutely research based, but I want to give parents, when I was raising Mitchell, I couldn't find the information I was looking for. I wanted something to thumb through and go, how can I do that? And it's looking and saying the principles and the ideas of positive psychology put into really easy, hands-on, practical activities, intentional things you can do to help your children be more kind, to help them if they're suffering from bullying, or even if they are a bully. We talk about that as well. Talking about how to have friendships. What does that look like? How do we build gratitude? How do we develop or foster an optimistic attitude in our children? So it is really practical, day-to-day things that you can do, but it's also not saying you have to do all of them. And it's also not having a go at parents. You know, every parent I've worked with, 99.99999, so a minuscule amount of parents I've ever worked with in the past 25 years have not had their child's best interest in heart, like this much. Most parents want the best for their kids. I don't want to put an extra added layer of responsibility on. This is actually stuff, when you look at it, if you do these activities, you're taking care of your own mental health and well-being as well.
Yes.
So that's the sort of thing, and they're not hard to do. So it's not saying, oh, you have to do this, you have to do that. We're all doing a pretty damn good job.
But it's just another element of parenting, and parenting isn't just about, you know, providing the basic needs and the Maslow's hierarchy, and, you know, providing rules and boundaries. It's also, you know, giving people permission, I guess, to actually have those conversations, and to walk through the discomfort to actually connect with children in this way.
And I think the reason we're doing it now is because the way we were parented was most probably not like that. And I'm not having a go at parents for our parents, but they didn't understand this stuff. They didn't have the knowledge we have now about psychological well-being. In fact, they wouldn't have talked about mental health in a pink fit. Unless to say, oh, somebody's crazy, or make fun of it. If you look back and look at the jokes in society, there were always an undercurrent of discrimination, or an undercurrent of craziness, or things like that, making fun. There wasn't actually an understanding that, hey, we all have difficulties with our psychological well-being at different times.
Yes.
There is nothing wrong with that. Just like we go to the doctor to help when we've got a cold or when we've got the flu, we actually go to a psychologist or a counselor or whoever you need to take care of your mental health and well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. All right, well, I've already ordered 2 copies, because I've got people in my family that are still raising young children, and I think that's you know, going to be a great Christmas
thank you
present.
so much, sir.
Great Christmas present for them. But yeah, I need to provide the caveat. I'm not saying you're bad parents, but here's something to think about to assist you in that challenging journey that is parenthood. So Kari, thank you so much for your time, and I think this is such an important book, and it really will, in my view, these sorts of approaches and this sort of focus on the younger generation really pays off in the long run as they grow into adulthood and grow into more resilient human beings that are mentally fit. So,
and Pete, I hope that's the case. That's my hope with this book, is that the ripple effect, they will show up as mentally fit adults in workplaces who are able to connect, who are able to talk about their psychological well-being, who are able to consider other people, who are empathic, so that we actually have more positive organizations. Because at the moment, as you would know, people don't always enjoy going to work. And that's quite sad, because work takes up a huge part of our life. So I'm hoping if I educate them, or if I help families educate them when they're young, it will make a ripple effect, a positive ripple effect on the world.
Absolutely. And I applaud you for the time and effort and research that you put in over the last 25 years to produce this work.
Make me feel old.
Oh, look, aren't we all? Aren't we all? But, you know, that's all just a mental construct that doesn't have to affect us. So thanks again for your time, Kari.
Thank you.
Okay, talk to you soon.